Okay, so have you ever stood in the baby food aisle at the grocery store and just felt like, oh my gosh, there's so much here?
Oh, absolutely. It can be so overwhelming.
It's like jars and pouches and puffs, and they all claim to be like the perfect thing for your kid.
Yeah, and they all have like the fancy labels and the pictures of fruits and vegetables.
Right. And it's like, how are you supposed to know?
It's tough, right? Like as a parent, you just want what's best for your kid.
Exactly. And you're trying to decipher these labels, and it's a whole other job on top of
Oh,
parenthood.
I mean, it really is like you almost need a degree in food science these days to figure it out.
But you know what? That's why we're doing this deep dive today.
Absolutely. We're going to like break it all down and hopefully make it a little less overwhelming for everyone.
We're going to separate fact from fiction.
Yes, from marketing hype,
Yes, all the marketing hype.
because there is a lot
Yeah,
of
we're gonna like uncover the truth about baby food.
like what's
Yeah.
really going on behind those cute little packages.
Right, like what is actually in that pouch.
Huh.
And to help us with this deep dive, we have our amazing expert. Welcome.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
I am so glad you're here because I feel like this is such a confusing topic and you know so much about it.
Yeah, well, I've been, deep in the research on this one, and it's fascinating.
Yeah, tell us what surprised you the most.
I think, honestly, one of the most surprising things is just how much the baby food industry has changed, even in the last few decades.
Oh, really?
Like, if you think about it, 100 years ago, the idea of buying pre-made baby food at the store would have sounded crazy.
Right, like someone would be like, "You're gonna buy what?"
Yeah.
Like, what are you talking about?
Back then, parents just had to figure it out on their own.
So what do they even do?
Well, before the 1920s, it was pretty much all homemade.
Okay.
And honestly, feeding babies adult food was kind of like the norm, and it was considered pretty risky.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And most kids didn't really get exposed to a variety of fruits and vegetables until way later in life.
Wow, that's so different from today.
Yeah, totally different role back then.
So who was like the first brave soul to be like, I'm gonna sell baby food?
Well, it all started with a dad, actually.
Well, of course it did.
Right. Like so many great inventions just come from a need.
Totally. A parent was like, there has to be a better way.
Exactly. His name was Harold Clapp, and he was in Rochester, New York.
Okay.
And he started bottling and selling strained peas and soups for local babies way back in the early 1900s.
That's amazing. He was like the original meal prepping parent.
Right. It's such a pioneer.
Love it.
But yeah, his little operation was really the very beginning of commercial baby food.
But I'm imagining his kitchen probably wasn't like, FDA approved or anything.
Probably not the most high-tech operation.
Right. It was probably just Harold in his kitchen with a bunch of peas.
Just the dad trying to make life a little easier.
And then Gerber came along and was like, we see an opportunity here.
Exactly. They were like, we can make this bigger and better.
And thus a baby food empire was born.
It's kind of a funny story, actually, because it was actually Daniel Gerber's wife, Dorothy, who kind of inspired the whole thing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the story goes that she was exhausted from, the never-ending task of straining peas for their daughter, Sally.
Oh, I feel her.
Right.
Straining peas is the worst.
The worst. So she suggested to Daniel, like, hey, your canning company could totally make this easier for parents everywhere.
Dorothy, you are
I know, right? Talk about a game changer.
She deserves like an honorary CEO title or something.
Seriously. So yeah, by 1928, Gerber was mass producing strained fruits and vegetables and soups and marketing them as, this scientifically sound, more nutritious alternative to homemade baby food.
Which, back then it probably was revolutionary.
Oh, absolutely. Like, can you imagine? No more endless hours of steaming and pureeing.
Right. It's like the Instant Pot of the 1920s.
Perfect analogy.
Yeah.
But it does make you wonder, how do we go from those early days of, relatively simple baby food to the overwhelming amount of choices we see on the shelves today?
Yeah, it's like a whole wall of baby food now.
It's a little out of control. And that's where things get really interesting and frankly a little concerning because the global baby food market is now worth billions of dollars.
Wow, billions.
Billions. And a huge chunk of that, like a whopping 70% of baby and toddler food in the U.S., falls under the category of ultra-processed.
Ultra-processed? Okay, that does not sound good.
No, it doesn't.
Especially for a baby. Like, what are we talking about here?
It's a great question. And it's important to understand what we're actually giving our little ones. We're not just talking about something being cooked or pureed. Ultra-processed foods have gone through multiple industrial processes, often using ingredients you wouldn't find in your own kitchen. Think about the last time you tried making baby food from scratch. It's a labor of love.
Oh my gosh, it's a lot of work
Right.
and so messy.
So messy. And then your blender is never the same.
Exactly. I feel like mine is permanently stained orange.
And companies know that. They know we're all short on time and energy, so they've capitalized on our desire for convenience. But that convenience, unfortunately, often comes at a cost.
Okay, so convenience is key, but what are we actually trading for that, ease when we're reaching for those ultra processed pouches and jars?
Well, one of the biggest concerns with ultra-processed baby food is the amount of hidden sugar that's lurking in those, seemingly innocent packages.
Really? Sugar. I have to admit, I didn't really think about sugar being a big issue in baby food.
It's not something you'd expect, right?
Right. It's not like they're adding scoops of candy to these things, so how much sugar can there really be in like a pouch of pureed bananas?
You would be shocked. A lot of these couches and jars, even the ones that seem healthy at first glance, contain added sugars.
Get out.
Oh yeah, for real.
Like, what kind of amounts are we talking about here?
Okay, so for example, we found a yogurt pouch that claimed to be made with real fruit on the front.
Okay, sounds pretty healthy.
Right. But it had 14 grams of sugar per serving.
14 grams, that's a lot.
It is. And get this, 8 of those grams were added sugars, not even from the fruit itself.
So it's like sneaking a candy bar into a pouch of applesauce?
Pretty much. And the crazy part is that the World Health Organization recommends absolutely zero added sugar for children under 2 years old.
Wow, zero added sugar under 2. That seems really hard to do.
It is. It's a tough rule to follow, but it's there for a reason, especially when you think about how tiny their little tummies are.
Right, they're still developing and everything.
Exactly. And here's the thing. Those added sugars often come from something called fruit concentrates, which sound healthy, but can be misleading.
Okay, fruit concentrates. So, like, what's the problem with those? They sound pretty natural to me.
They do sound natural, right? But here's where the confusion comes in. When fruits are concentrated down to make those syrups and pastes, their natural sugars become much more concentrated too.
Oh, so it's like intensified sweetness.
Exactly. Plus, to make things even more confusing, in the US, fruit concentrates aren't always clearly labeled as added sugar on the ingredient list.
Oh no, so a parent could be looking at the label, thinking they're making a healthy choice, and not even realize they're giving their baby this, like, hidden dose of sugar.
It's true. It's like a sneaky loophole.
That's frustrating.
It definitely makes it trickier to decipher those labels and make informed decisions.
Totally. So we really got to be detectives.
Yes. You have to be savvy.
Okay, give us another example. Like, is there a specific product where you were like, wow, I can't believe there's added sugar in this?
Yeah, for sure. We were looking at this pouch of organic apple peach oatmeal. And, on the surface, it sounds like a healthy breakfast option, right?
Yeah, totally. It's organic. It has fruit and grains. Like, what's not to love?
Right. Exactly. But then, tucked away in the ingredient list, we saw it. 2 grams of added sugar, all from fruit concentrates.
No way. Even the organic stuff isn't safe. It's like, where can we turn?
I know, it can feel like you need a degree in food science just to navigate the baby food aisle these days.
Seriously. It's
Yeah.
so overwhelming.
But that's why we're here. We're going to arm you with the knowledge to decode those labels and feel confident about the choices you're making for your little one.
Okay, let's talk strategy. Like, what are some red flags that parents should look out for when they're scrutinizing those baby food labels? Because, like you said, those pouches are so convenient.
Pouches are definitely the go-to for a lot of parents because they're portable and mess-free.
Right, you can just toss one in the diaper bag and go.
Exactly. So when you're looking at those pouches, one thing to watch out for is a really low calorie count.
Oh, really? I would have thought we'd want to avoid high-calorie options.
It seems counterintuitive, right? But remember, babies are growing so rapidly, and they need a lot of nutrient-dense calories to support their development.
That makes sense. So a low-calorie count is kind of a red flag that maybe this isn't the most nutrient-packed option.
Exactly. It's a sign that the product might be filled with, fillers and other stuff that's not really doing anything for your baby.
Okay, so low calories, not what I would have expected. Got it. What else should we be on the lookout for?
Obviously, keep an eye out for those added sugars, whether they're listed as plain old sugar or hiding in those sneaky fruit concentrates.
Right, those are like the undercover agents of the sugar world.
Exactly. And then another thing to watch out for are those super long ingredient lists, especially when they have a bunch of words that you can't even pronounce.
Oh yeah, like what even is maltodextrin anyway?
Right. Who knows? Or high fructose corn syrup, artificial dyes, all that stuff.
Okay, so basically, if it sounds like it belongs in a science experiment rather than a baby's tummy, it's probably not the best choice.
Exactly. Those ingredients offer zero nutritional value and can actually be harmful to developing digestive systems.
Yikes. So, short ingredient list, recognizable foods, that's what we're going for.
You got it. Look for options that are as close to homemade as possible, just without the added sugars and artificial ingredients and unnecessary fillers.
Yeah.
Okay, so if I can understand everything on the ingredient list, and it sounds like something I might actually have in my own kitchen, that's a good sign.
You got it. It shouldn't feel like rocket science to feed your baby.
Right. Okay, we've tackled pouches, but what about some of the other popular baby and toddler food options out there? Like, I remember those classic baby puffs being a staple in my house.
Oh, yeah, the puffs. Those are a classic for a reason.
They're great for like developing hand-eye coordination and introducing different textures.
Absolutely. But, and this is a big but, they can be loaded with added sugar, and they often use refined grains, which don't have all the fiber and nutrients of whole grains.
Oh no, see, this is what I mean. I never even would have thought to check the sugar content of puffs. They just seem so innocent.
I do, right.
They're just little puffs of air, but they can sabotage us with sugar.
Sneaky little things.
So what should parents be looking for when it comes to puffs?
Look for options with minimal ingredients. Ideally just the grain, maybe a fruit or veggie for flavor, and perhaps a pinch of salt, and of course, no added sugars.
Minimal ingredients, check. What about those yogurt melt things? Those seem to be everywhere these days.
Yeah, yes, yogurt melts. They might sound like a healthier snack option, but they often provide very little in terms of probiotics, even though they love to advertise real yogurt on the front of the package.
Of course there's a catch.
There always is. Plus, you guessed it, they tend to be packed with sugar.
Ugh, there's nothing sacred. Okay, so those are out.
I don't.
What about toddler milk? My little guy's getting close to that age, so I'm starting to see those little cartons everywhere.
Toddler milk is another one where marketing can be a little misleading
Okay, let's tell me more.
because it's often not even necessary, especially if your toddler is already eating a variety of nutrient-rich foods and drinking regular milk.
Interesting. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, and plus, you already know what I'm going to say.
Let me guess. It's loaded with added sugar.
Bingo! You got it.
Yeah.
Plus, it's usually full of processed ingredients and significantly more expensive than just buying regular milk.
So those little cartons might look cute and convenient, but it sounds like regular milk is really the way to go.
You're absolutely right. Sticking with regular milk is a win for your toddler's health and your wallet.
Music to my ears. Okay, we've covered so much ground here today, from the history of baby food to decoding those tricky labels. But let's talk about why this all matters so much. Like, what are the real health implications, both in the short term and long term, of feeding babies a diet that's high in these ultra-processed foods?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Right.
So in the short term, consistently eating a lot of ultra-processed foods can lead to digestive issues for babies,
Oh, no, like what kind of digestive issues?
like gas and bloating and constipation, things you definitely don't want your little one dealing with.
Poor little tummies. It's heartbreaking to see them uncomfortable like that.
It really is. And these foods can also disrupt the delicate balance of bacteria in their gut, which can sometimes lead to skin problems like eczema.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize it could impact their skin, too.
It can be connected. And here's the other thing. Consistently offering these ultra-processed foods early on can actually increase a baby's risk of developing a preference for sugary processed foods later on in life.
Oh, wow. So it's not even just about their immediate health, but also about potentially shaping their taste preferences for years to come.
Exactly. It's like setting the stage for their future relationship with food.
Wow, that's kind of profound when you think about it.
It really is.
Yeah.
And then in the long term, a diet high in these ultra-processed foods, especially during those crucial early years of development, can increase a child's risk of developing some serious health problems later on.
Like what? What kind of health problems are we talking about?
Like obesity, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, all those big ones.
Wow, that's heavy stuff. It really makes you realize that every bite really does count, especially in those early years when they're growing and developing so quickly.
Absolutely. It's all about laying the foundation for a lifetime of good health.
But I have to imagine this information can feel overwhelming for parents who are already bombarded with so much advice and opinions about, well, everything when it comes to raising kids.
Oh, absolutely. And the last thing we want to do is add to that pressure or make parents feel guilty for, occasionally reaching for a pouch when they're short on time.
Exactly. We've all been there.
We've all been there, exhausted, maybe running late,
Yeah.
and the pouch is just right there. calling your name.
Right, sometimes convenience wins. It's about empowering parents with knowledge, not overwhelming them with guilt.
Exactly. We're all just doing the best we can.
But it does feel like there's a bigger conversation to be had here, right? Like, it shouldn't be solely on parents' shoulders to navigate this complex and often misleading industry. It's true, it shouldn't be so hard to figure out what to feed your own kid.
Right. Like, shouldn't baby food be straightforward?
Yeah, you would think so.
But instead, it's like this whole big thing with labels and ingredients and marketing.
And then you're trying to, like, make the best choice for your kid, but also not spend a fortune or, spend hours in the kitchen every day.
Right. Because who has time for that?
Exactly.
Okay.
So where do we go from here? Like, what needs to change?
Well, honestly, I think there needs to be a systemic shift. Like, we need to see manufacturers step up and actually prioritize creating healthier options.
Yeah. Like less of the processed stuff and more of the good stuff.
Exactly. Like using real whole ingredients.
Right. Like if I can pronounce it, that's a good sign.
Exactly. And cutting back on the added sugars and the fillers and all that junk that doesn't belong in baby food.
And maybe they could make those ingredient lists a little easier to understand while they're at it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, why does it have to be so complicated? Parents deserve to know exactly what they're feeding their babies without needing a magnifying glass and a food science dictionary.
Totally. Transparency is key. No more hiding behind tricky wording and marketing jargon. Just tell us what's in it.
Exactly. And, it's not just about making healthier options available. It's about making them accessible, too.
That's a really good point.
Because, let's be real, fresh, organic produce can be expensive.
It can be really expensive.
And not every family has the time or the resources to make all of their baby food from scratch.
Right. It's a privilege to even have the time to do that, let alone the money for all the organic ingredients.
Exactly. So it's about leveling the playing field a little bit.
Making sure that all families have the opportunity to, nourish their kids with the best possible food.
Absolutely.
Regardless of their budget or where they live or, how much time they have to spend in the kitchen.
Right. Like every baby deserves a healthy start.
I love that.
It shouldn't matter how much money your parents make or where you live. You should have access to good, nutritious food.
Exactly. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground today about baby food.
We really have.
The history, the labels, the sugar traps, all that good stuff.
We've gone deep.
But if there was just one key takeaway, one thing you really want our listeners to remember, what would it be?
For me, it always comes back to this. Just like with adults, the more we can expose babies to whole, unprocessed foods early on, the better chance they have of developing those healthy eating habits for life.
Right. It's like setting them up for success right from the start.
Exactly. It's about building a good foundation.
Love it. Okay, so that's all the time we have for today, but before we wrap up, is there anything else you want to add?
I just want to say that it's not about being perfect. Not every meal has to be a gourmet masterpiece.
Oh, thank goodness, because mine are definitely not.
It's really about just doing the best you can with the information and resources you have.
Yes, I'm all about that.
Don't be afraid to get curious in that baby food aisle. Flip those packages over, read those labels, and just choose the best options you can.
Yes, channel your inner detective.
Exactly. And remember, you don't have to be a gourmet chef to introduce your little ones to the wonderful world of real food.
I love that. So just get in there and start experimenting and have fun with it. Well, that is all the time we have for this deep dive into the world of baby food.
Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Thank you so much for being here and for sharing all of your incredible knowledge with us. I know I learned a ton, and I hope our listeners did too. Until next time, everyone, happy feeding.